of rodent-esque creature with the markings of a skunk, but a build more like a small dog. I couldn't tell if they were just pulling this out of their ass or not, but the teens were all on high alert for it. One had a slide whistle. Another had a sort of clicker that they used to click out various things to try and stir up any sign of this mysterious snipe. In my time at the enclosure, I've never heard or read of a snipe, so if it's a real thing, then it isn't even on our radar. That doesn't mean it's not real, and that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. It just means I went into this thing totally unprepared. As the search continued, I actually got pretty into it. Sure, I was going against a bunch of literal teenagers to catch something that I never did get an answer if it even exists, but I actually got pretty competitive. Whether it was to make up for my subpar cookies or because it was something to do, I don't know. But I got so sucked into the search and trying to best these heckling jerks of kids that I didn't even think twice when Holly whispered a bit louder than needed, "Over there, the bushes, I see its tail." I threw myself into that bush with the bag. I didn't even think. I just grabbed and tried to catch whatever I could grab. What I caught was a bunch of leaves and a twig that snuck behind my glasses and poked me in the eye. No living creature, no snipe. I didn't even hear laughter, which is what I'd expected to hear. When I looked up, they were all gone. I never even heard or saw them take off. Absolutely zero sign of them. There 1 second, gone the next. And I realized I was duped. I was the dupee. A dupee with a sore eye. As soon as I realized my situation, I brushed myself off and, with the utmost composure, started the trek back to the main event. Survived my rite of passage, right? I'd be more part of things, right? Jumping into that damn bush would have to be worth something. But as I made my way towards the edge of the woods, I realized I was suddenly much farther from the tree line than I originally was. At that point, I couldn't even see the tree line anymore. But I knew what direction I had to go, so I started back from where I came. I started to fidget with the burlap sack to keep my hands occupied as I walked. The sound of the cicadas and my own footsteps were all I could hear. I was more frustrated than anything. Of course, I was the one ditched. I thought they would pick one of the kids, let them have their laughs, and go from there. But I guess they'd get better laughs if it was someone else they could focus on together, huh? Nothing brings a community together better than casting collective judgment. As I walked back towards the tree line, I eventually heard the sound of something walking behind me. I could tell there was a good distance between me and the sound, but I don't like surprises. I turned around as quickly as I could and saw one of those three-eyed deer with perfectly symmetrical yet overgrown horns and slightly humanoid hind legs. Not too uncommon in these parts, not usually much of a threat, but still unsettling to see up close. They took me a while to get used to, but this line of work desensitizes you pretty quick. Those in town know to avoid these deer. Other creatures in the woods know to avoid them too. So I should have backed off sooner. We locked eyes for what felt like hours. However long it actually was, I don't know. I didn't feel threatened at first. More like I was being analyzed. But then I heard a voice in my head.
Run.
So I did. Not immediately, as I normally would have and definitely should have. But after one or two awkward steps away, the deer bucked up and made like it was going to charge. So then I took off. I don't know if the deer got territorial or startled or what, but I didn't have time to try and figure that out at the moment. I ended up dropping the bag and flashlight and just sprinted as fast as my legs would take me towards the tree line that had only just then started to come back into view. It was definitely dark, but my eyes had adjusted pretty quickly to take in what light they could from the moonlight.
Faster.
No matter how fast I forced my legs, the sound of hooves against the dirt and leaves were never far behind. In fact, in mere moments, it was right behind me. And then I felt something slam into my back, hard. I was sent flying forward and skidded across the ground. I had never had a violent encounter with one of these deer before, but when the snipe hunt tournament leaders spoke about returning and surviving, what was it about that day that made it special for them to host it on? I mean, the same time every year in the same part of the woods, in the same parts of the fields. What was making the deer more volatile instead of fleeing or just staring like they tended to? I'd seen them buck, but they'd never charged me. I wasn't wondering that then, of course. No, then I was scrambling back onto my feet. I'd even lost my glasses for a bit, but I found them again pretty quickly when my hand slammed down on top of them in my rush up and definitely broke part of them. Speaking of breaking, it definitely felt like the damn knot deer broke something when it bucked me, or at least cracked a few ribs. They do pack a good hit when angered. Looking back, I'm surprised it had stopped after hitting me just once, as if it had made its point.
Get out.
So with my busted glasses in hand, I booked it past the tree line and took off into the fields. In the distance, I could see the lights and the bonfire and the rest of the attendees, mostly the remaining chaperones and the parents of those kids who were out on the hunt at that point. Some kids, including those that had duped me in the woods, were near the fire. No one seemed to notice me at first. And the hurting... it hurt so much to run. And I did what you're never supposed to do and looked back over my shoulder as I ran to see if the deer was still there. It was, but it just stood by the tree line. It stood still as stone, and many other of those multi-eyed knot deer were standing next to it. It could have been a whole